Katz?
Despite my best efforts, I gotta remember to let you to say hello first. I mean, I sit there, I think, I like, wait, is she gonna say it? I'm gonna, next episode, there's just gonna be silence until you say hello. That's I'm determined.
I love it. I love it. Well, I'm excited to be able to have this conversation with you today, Peter. Thank you for making time for this.
Oh, thank you for making time. And whenever we're messaging, trying to find our time, I always just, it's like, it emerges just as it needs to, even in the moments where it seems like it can't. And I love that. So Robyne, I'm curious. It looks like you have a different background. Where are you today for our listeners?
So today I'm actually at home and I'm in a different space corner in my office. This is the corner that we've carved out. I'm about to start the process of doing an audio recording of an audiobook. So we needed to find a space where that would be congruent to having good sound. So I'm in my office in a different space, but this is kind of my little sacred corner. So I'm pretty excited to be able to join you from this space today.
And Robyne, you're saying an audiobook, but I think it's important to say that it's your new book, Stressing Wisely, that I had the great pleasure of getting an advance copy of. And I'm just so excited. I'm just thankful that it exists. And I'm thankful that people are going to get to be supported through this beautiful, touching, powerful, important, wise offering that you've created. So I'm excited for that for people.
Thank you for those very, very kind words. Thank you, Peter.
Oh, it's the truth. I kind of want to pick up on something that you just said. So
yeah.
I love this idea of a little sacred space within another space, and that it's okay, when I come to this spot, this is what I'm going to do, or this is what this space is for. I really kind of use that in my life as well. And it's not just in spaces. Sometimes it's a piece of clothing or something, but these signals to ourselves of okay, I'm crossing through the threshold of this kind of one modality and I'm entering this other modality to do this other thing. I'm currently up in the country, and I come into this little room right here, and which used to be a walk-in closet that the previous owners had, and we turned it into this little room, and kind of cutely decorated with hope. I kind of come in here, and this is my little space to do my work and drop in and write. Literally, if I look past the camera, I just see trees and water, and today I see snow. And so I'm curious about, for you, how do you go about sort of setting up these spaces in your life? Or is it just, did you just do this intentionally, or was it something that sort of happened kind of haphazardly because that's where the best acoustics were? But it even looks like it sort of has a different feel to it. When you're in your other space, it's sort of there's a grandness to the room that's felt, and it's sort of very clean, and it's sort of it has a certain pristineness to it. You look now like you're sort of in this kind of cottage feel. I'll just describe for the listeners. There's almost a wood looking wall. There's a beautiful painting of a lighthouse and some books. So can you just describe the process of what it was like of setting up that space for yourself?
Yeah. And I totally echo that sentiment of having spaces, even within spaces, or these almost these little rituals, which kind of just almost, it's it eases the cognitive load or the mental load of decision making or thinking, because as soon as you associate that space, it's okay, this is space where I'm going to think or reflect or decompress, even having just that little corner. And it doesn't have to be, and I often share this with persons, when we create these little kind of areas of refuge in our own houses or in our own workspaces, it doesn't have to be like grandiose at all. It's like you put the meaning behind the things in those spaces that's going to kind of elicit those feelings that you're hoping to activate. So you're absolutely right. For me, this particular corner was designed when we were putting this office together, with that intention of being like a space where it can be like reflective. It could be just like not really a tech space. And the way I was able to do it to differentiate it from another part of this particular workspace was to actually have the shiplap walls installed in this kind of corner. And then this is where like my books are. This is where one of my, as you pointed out, one of my most favorite pieces of art. It's actually from Young's studio. It's an artist in Newfoundland who created this picture. It's called The Lighthouse Keeper's Daughter. And so there's a little girl standing on the rocks in front of a lighthouse. So this is like a really significant piece of art that means a lot to me. So, and again, not having like an office chair, Peter, like literally like this super cozy chair where I can sit like cross-legged. And this is that place where when I need a break from the tech, a break from the work, even in that occupied space of being workspace, I can kind of move over to here to have that kind of place where I can reflect and think. And in this particular case, it will also serve with excellent acoustics to be able to do the recording for the audiobook. And then it will return back to being more just kind of the quiet corner.
I love that, Robyne. I mean, there's a few things that you said in there that I think are worth kind of pointing out to people, and they are just so immediately applicable. So in the facilitation work that I do, especially over the last few years when we're all sort of working from home, we would have people go find an object in their house that maybe, you know, whatever the question was, like, you know, what's an object that reminds you of the kind of leader that you want to be, or, you know, any kind of prompt like that. And so people would, you know, go find scissors or, you know, like an apple, and then they would then attach all of this meaning to it, just by sort of associating it with the question that they'd been given. And all of a sudden, these inanimate objects like a screwdriver or hammer or whatever, all of a sudden had this meaning and this importance attached to it. And often people, like, you know, leave it on their desk as like, okay, now this means this, and now it's important to me. Yeah. And so I'm just, you know, obviously with a painting or something like that, it's the meaning is more obviously achieved. Yeah. Although for you, that idea of a lighthouse and, you know, a lot of your imagery around kind of calm within the storm and that kind of stuff, I know is deeply significant to you. But that painting is special for you in particular in the way that it's special for you. Just like if someone grabs a hammer or a mug or anything that they might have around, it's like, how can we surround ourselves with those things that when we look at them, when we enter those spaces, we feel that sense of like, oh yeah, this is like my little ecosystem that I've built, and I've created this little ecosystem so that I can show up as my best, so I can show up like connected to those good feeling thoughts, so that I can do the work that I want to do in the world, so that I can be the parent that I want to be, so that I can, you know, be the partner that I want to be. Like I love this idea of kind of curating space, and maybe it's my theater background that has really got me tuned into that. But I really do think about like lighting and sound and textures and objects and you know tokens or whatever they might be. I just love the idea of all of us just having these spaces that we can go to, even if it's like a little corner where we can kind of feel like, okay, this is me arriving with myself.
Absolutely. And again, I appreciate in the busyness of our days and the busyness and, as you would say, the fullness of how we, you know, show up in our lives, having these, like, one of the things that we talk about in like habit formation is like making success inevitable. And so one of the things that we think about is like setting up our environment so that way it's congruent to what it is that we're trying to do. So I think by having those spaces, and again, it doesn't have to be elaborate, but it's that meaning that you put onto it, as you described, where it's like, okay, when I go into the space, this is kind of how I'm going to feel. This is how I'm going to think, or this gives me a chance to kind of catch my thoughts or catch kind of where I'm at. And and be present. So again, it's a big exercise of mindfulness, really. And it also, again, really lightens that kind of mental load. And the thing that I'm seeing working with groups right now, Peter, all over the world is just this like deep fatigue. And what's fascinating to me is I got really curious, Peter, about this fatigue, whether it was like physical fatigue. And one of the things when we started to explore that, it wasn't like physical fatigue as in their like bodies and their bones were like tired and depleted. It was more this like emotional fatigue or this like intellectual fatigue of having to critically think and problem solve and manage all of the things that they have moving on in their lives. And so anything that we can do to allow just that like moment of freedom, just to kind of let some of that go, or just kind of let some of those things land, to get a little bit of that emotional kind of rest or that intellectual rest, that, any space or way that we create ritual around that is going to actually help people feel so much better. And one of the other interesting findings that we're having is the reality is so many people, again, have this really deep fatigue and they're thinking like, oh, I just need like a weekend or I just need like vacation and then I'm going to be okay. Yet if we don't learn how to rest in the meantime, like learn in context how to take those little micro breaks, we can leave and go on vacation and then like decompress. But as soon as we come back, Peter, all of those feelings and all of the ways of doing things are going to like get basically reactivated. So then it's going to feel like, what's the point? Why do I bother taking a break if I just come back feeling so depleted anyway? Versus like learning how to do these things in context. So having just even that place in your mind you can go to, or just a song you can listen to, or something to read, just to kind of break up some of that cognitive work that we're doing all the time, I think can bring a lot of ease into people's day to let them like recover in context.
I love that idea. It just makes it kind of more bite-sized and accessible versus like it's not always possible to find those bigger things, but I think it is accessible to all of us to find even just the smallest of moments. So I love that. I'm having this inner debate of like, do I share this? And I think I'm going to. I think it's about to come out of my mouth. So I'm excited. So this is a day today where I have like back to back. I'm kind of in solid meetings from like 10 to 5, but I'm in this beautiful place that I love to come to, but it's kind of like a work day. So I'm like, I want to be outside. I want to be, like out for a walk. I want to do this thing. And right before I can't believe I'm going to say this, but I'm just going to say it. It's not that weird. Right before this call, I was like just kind of jonesing to go outside, and I had to pee, and I'm in nature, and so I just went and I peed outside, and I had this like really nice moment of just like breathing in the air and like getting my like dose of outside while I peed outside, and that was my like little moment. Where I was going to be peeing either way. How did I make it an extra nice moment of pee?
I love it. And you know what's so amazing is I just imagine like that inner little Peter, right? That little boy Peter part of you is just like, this is everything, right? And, I think that's amazing. And again, finding things in that, like, often we talk about, like these kind of big monumental things that are like, okay, this is a big deal. We don't want to forget it. Versus we talked about this in our last episode about like, if you can find like joy in like the simplest of things, I honestly think that's one of the greatest buffers to be able to get through busy days or challenging seasons. If you can, again, find just like those simple pleasures. And again, that idea that like the little things are actually not that little after all. Those are actually the things that when we cobble them together to create these like great little moments. And it's funny because when you're sharing just that little kind of reflection, yesterday I was on the road with Ava and we were at a provincial cheer competition. And we had this moment where like we had like a ton of time in between these events, and we had like 8 hours. So we were trying to be like strategic. And one of the expressions that I actually find like abrasive for me is this idea of killing time. Just because if time is our most precious resource, I don't want to like kill time or like waste time. And so anyway, so we were kind of like putting together a wee bit of a plan to figure out like how do we want to use our time wisely and what would be the most effective. And anyway, we had this moment where we finally decided that, we made a plan and then we were going to grab food. And then I said to her, this is great. We'll grab food. And then I said, I'm going to grab coffee and then get gas for the vehicle. So I wasn't getting it at like 10 o'clock at night when this event was over. And we pulled into this community that we weren't familiar with, Peter. And there was the restaurant she wanted to go to with a coffee shop in the same parking lot. And in the same parking lot was also a gas station. And like, we both kind of paused and we had this moment where we looked at each other and she's like, did we just like create the perfect pit stop? Like, I think we literally just manifested the most perfect pit stop in this moment together. And like, we thought it was the funniest thing ever. And again, obviously these things existed. But it was just the fact that we decided in that moment that it was just like, this is like the universe smiling at us and all our good efforts are paying off. And we're going to have this perfect little moment where we we went through this little triangle of grab the dinner we wanted and the coffee and then the gas. And again, so it's like, it could have just been a regular pit stop, but the fact that we decided between the two of I kind of improv that this is a perfect moment, right? This is a perfect moment of like convenience and ease. And we just thought that like we were winning simply because of really great urban planning in Waterloo, Ontario.
There is some great urban planning in Waterloo. I love that, Robyne, and it reminds me of something I've heard you say many times is like, when we know what we're looking for, we're more likely to find it. And so just the context of like, I'm killing time for 8 hours, you're going to probably find boredom and, not very much versus, oh, like, wouldn't this be great? And how do we make this meaningful? And how do we not kill the time, but like fill the time or thrill the time or whatever the good rhyme is. I love that you kind of created that. I was listening to another podcast just last night, and I think there's a segue here. It was the Rich Roll podcast, which one of my favorites, and he was interviewing Robert McKee, who's like a really, really kind of legendary screenwriter, and has had like, I think, all giant famous movies. But for the last 40 years of his life, he's been teaching others, and he does these seminars kind of teaching people how to do screenwriters. And in his audience, he has multiple Academy Award winners and Emmy Award winners. Like, he's basically like the screenwriting teacher to the greatest screenwriting people of all time, and not just screenwriting, but all kinds of writing. But something that he said, like, which I think connects to what you're just talking about, really kind of stopped me in my tracks. And I recognize that it's maybe like sort of I'm not sure if I'm about to word it in a way that's not going to seem controversial to people of different religious backgrounds or beliefs or spiritualities or whatever. But he essentially said, like, life in and of itself, like just at its basic core, is meaningless, in the sense that it's just like, like there's biology and science and gases being exchanged, and like oxygen here and carbon dioxide over there, and like there's all of this stuff, and sorry. What prompted him to say this was a journalist asked him, like, why are you still doing this? Like, you're 80 years old, like you have all the money in the world, you have all the success and notoriety in the world. Like, why are you doing this? And that's where he started talking about this idea of like, well, like our kind of job in life is to like make our lives meaningful. And it's like, what are the things that are meaningful to you? Because everything else, like just by design, your life is not sort of like inherently meaningful. It's like it's sort of upon us in a beautiful, invitational, curiosity-filled kind of a way of like, what are the things that I find meaningful, and how do I make my life full of those things? And there was just something about that answer that I just was like kind of blown away by. And of course, I I think that there is something special about just aliveness in and of itself, and that just the fact that we're here is special and meaningful. And again, I'm not trying to go down a rabbit hole of different religious beliefs or anything like that, but I love this idea of like, what is meaningful to me? And I wonder, like, if we were to actually ask ourselves that question on a regular basis with greater intention, sort of like what you and Ava did, like, rather than like killing time, like this is kind of a meaningless 8 hours. It's like, how do we make this a meaningful 8 hours? I just love that reframe.
Yeah. I love everything that you were sharing there, and I don't feel as though it's controversial at all. Like I think these are like really great questions to be curious about. And the reality, as humans, we are meaning makers. For us to like understand and have comprehension, like we have to put meaning behind things, and we associate meaning. And it's this idea versus like thinking about, even when we think of our own stories, and when we don't understand like why something happens and we can't like put like meaning behind it, that's actually what keeps us so stuck emotionally. Like, you know, one of the things we often talk about around like acceptance, and how acceptance is part of resiliency, like learning how to work with our stories. And it reminds me, in what you're sharing there, is this idea that like our life is a series almost of like these dots in kind of isolation. And then we, as the meaning makers, we connect the dots. Like we are the ones that actually draw this connection, and we create these tapestries that we call like our lived experience. And those to somebody else might look markedly different because they are interpreting and making meaning in different ways. So again, I think it has so much to do with like us as our human nature in terms of putting meaning behind things. And when we actually take a wee bit of kind of almost like an emboldened approach to putting meaning behind things, I think it can really serve us well. And versus kind of like having kind of other people write our stories and kind of tell us what makes sense or how to think or what that means, versus what does that mean for me? Like how am I choosing to put meaning behind this? And I often talk about this idea in my writing about like courage is such an amazing emotion. And what I love about courage, because I think making meaning is actually a courageous act, because it's a trust, right? We're trusting that all of this is somehow working together for a greater good or for a higher purpose. And this idea about like, we can actually even like borrow courage, right? We can actually like borrow courage from others, from different sources, different places. And again, all that kind of contributes to the richness that we can put into this meaning making practice. And I just think that's one of the most extraordinary tools that we have in our kind of arsenal of being meaning makers. And also that idea that meaning also helps us to kind of come upon our purpose. And I believe each and every one of us are here for a reason. And when we start to see what is meaningful to us, I think then we can start to see our purpose. And right now, especially talking to lots of groups, Peter, so many people share with me that they feel as if they're almost like rudderless, that they just don't even know what they should be doing or ought to be doing anymore. And they're asking really great questions about like, is this really how I want to spend the next 3 decades of my professional life? Or is this really how I want to invest my time and our energy? And again, I think that meaning is like knowing what lands with us is a gateway for us to actually discover and kind of reconnect with our purpose. And I think when we are in pursuit, whatever that pursuit is, I actually think that's when we're at our most optimal self.
So much in what you said that I resonate with, and I think is like important to underline and circle is, and actually, you know, Robert McKee in this interview sort of kind of said as much as well, is that like it's very easy to live a life based on the things that are meaningful to others. And like, that's sort of an easy thing to take on. And it is like that. I think the word, like you said, it's courage that has us really ask ourselves, like, what are those things that are meaningful to me? And I'm also thinking about the Meg Wheatley, talk and some of her writings about purpose and the idea that of sort of separating out the meaning from the outcome. It's like, especially like I've been doing a lot of work recently with like healthcare, and certainly in healthcare, we're not always going to get the outcome that we want, whether that's, actual challenging outcomes for our patients, or whether it's a system that has a complexity to it. Every country has their different medical systems, and there's different complexities to each of them. We're fortunate to have, free healthcare here in Canada, but that also comes with its complexities and challenges. And so oftentimes, like, people are operating in these systems where they're like super passionate about something, and they're deeply devoted to the outcomes, and yet they're just not always going to get the outcomes that they want to get, because that's just the way it goes. And so she really encourages us to think about the deeper underlying meaning of, like, not to be doing the thing because we want the result, but be doing the thing because we know that this is the thing that is meaningful, that, like, we really believe in, that we stand for, that. And so I just, as I'm listening to you, I think about this idea of, just even in my own life, of certain, maybe milestones that I want to achieve, or certain things that I really get caught up in the outcome, versus, and I think in that process, maybe you deny yourself the joy and the meaningfulness of the pursuit, of the connection to the purpose of, like, well, this is why I'm doing this, and I'm doing this in this way. It's like the cashier at the grocery store, like, that's like really friendly and engaged and looks you in the eye. It's like there's like a choice there of, like, okay, maybe this is my dream job, maybe it's not, but, like, how am I showing up for this in a way that I'm like meaningfully connected to who I am, and the kind person that I like to be, or whatever that might be.
Yeah. Oh, Peter, that lands so deeply for me. Just, again, that kind of idea that, we're in all of these different systems, we're in these situations, and, those are so often they're like experience, or they're like events. They're not necessarily like characteristics of who we are, or what we are about, or our potential. And, it's interesting because when we actually study like human happiness and like life satisfaction, which is something that, there's a lot of field in psychology that are curious about, like, what makes people happy. What I found so fascinating about that literature is it actually talks about that there's this misconception that people feel happy when they've actually achieved their goals, right? Like, when you achieve the goal that you set out, that's going to, like, elicit that deep sense of satisfaction and happiness. But what the research actually shows, it's that it's the pursuit. It's like being in process. It is that idea of, like, working towards something. And especially if it's a noble pursuit, it's the fact that showing up each day, working towards something that matters, that's actually where we experience deep satisfaction. And when we finally cross the finish line, like, yeah, for sure, it feels good. But the way our brain works, it's like, okay, what's next? Whereas like when we have like clarity of like the goal, and like we show up each day. So even that example of that, that person working in service, where maybe or maybe not, that's their kind of dream job. It's this idea that, like, if they are attached to this like noble pursuit as to why they're doing this, and this is working towards something, it's just amazing that that's actually where we feel the most like steady and happy, when we like essentially like keep the promise to ourselves that we're going to do that thing, and we do that every single day. It actually strengthens our relationship with ourselves. So I often remind myself that, and again, that's just such an old additive that's kind of, it's the journey, but the reality is it's progression is where we actually feel the deepest sense of satisfaction and that deepest sense of like sustained happiness. It's not always achieving the outcome.
Love it. Well, Robyne, I'm mindful of our time here. Do you think we have time for a rapid fire question? What's your guess there?
My guess is we have time for a rapid fire question. Yes. Do you have one top of mind, Peter?
I do. I often change my question based on, like, I sort of like give myself a couple options, but then I always like, oh, the conversation kind of leads me to. So here's the question, Robin.
Okay.
You can pick any space on planet Earth, like any location. It could be present or it could be historical, but like, what is the space that you can enter, like a physical space, and you feel the most Robin?
That is such a ginormous question. Like, honestly, that is such a ginormous question. And I have like two different ways of wanting to answer it. But like the short answer is like in my own shoes, like in my own feet. Like I can be anywhere in the world and I can ground myself like in my own feet. And it's like, I have everything that I need. And like, obviously I love being with my family. I love certain geographical spaces and locations, and I've put meaning and memories to so many of them. And I love the fact that it's like, I can connect with like real raw Robin, like just exactly who I am, wherever I am in the world. If I just like pause long enough and just like connect with my feet, you can put me anywhere and I'll be okay. So it's like in myself, with myself.
That's
I'm not sure if that was the right answer.
Oh, I mean, it's such a good answer. I hear that answer and I feel like inspired and sort of like aspirationally. I'm like, I just admire that answer, and I'm like, that's a lighthouse for me of like, that's the way I always want to feel too. Not sure I'm completely there yet.
I can share with you. I can share with you though. That's like after like essentially like a lot of hard work. Like I was my own worst enemy for the longest time. And I like tried to like basically like run away from myself for so many years of my life. And then finally, just again, with a lot of therapy, a lot of support, getting into that place where I was ready for the lessons I needed to learn, it was like finding out that like I actually can be my greatest ally. And the relationship with myself is going to be the oldest and only relationship that is going to be from cradle to grave. And I had to do a lot of repair with it. And now it's gotten to the point where, you know, I'm not antisocial by any means, but like I actually can enjoy my own company. And that's something that was something I worked towards, to be able to feel safe and confident in myself and with myself. But it came after a lot of work. And now what I love is just that feeling like I can kind of go anywhere. And I, again, always will have exactly what I need in that moment, because that's who I am and that's what I do. So that's thanks to a lot of support and a lot of healing and a lot of really great therapists who've helped me along the way to actually get to that place of having that confidence, that I'm okay.
I love that. There's like there's a giant thread poking out now that I want to pull on, just about like the connect, which I won't, but just the connection between this idea of pursuit, the idea, like when you were talking earlier about the idea that like when we arrive, when we do the thing, like I find that that's often associated with like real sadness, like, cause it's like, then you've stopped the pursuit. And I think I've described to you before, like these moments where I'm like, oh, I'm going to take the day off and go to the park, or, you know, and then after like a long tour or something, and then I'm like completely depressed because I'm like, I'm with myself, you know? And I've done a lot of work along the same lines that you've described since then. But like in some ways, that's like a life's work to be able to like be in stillness and be okay. And I think if one can truly do that, then for me, it stands to reason that then the things that we decide to do, because we're not doing them to pull ourselves away from ourselves, we're doing them because they're the things that are actually meaningful. They're the things we actually want to do. They're the things that are like coming from the place of like, I could be still and be okay, and I choose to do this thing because I'm connected to myself. And so anyways, there's a whole rabbit hole I want to go down there, but I love that answer.
Well, thank you. And again, I'm mindful your answer. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are there, if you want to share.
Well, I don't think I can. My answer aspirationally is what you described, my present answer. To be honest, it's like I'm not sure that I have that space. It's a bit almost triggering for me to answer that question, just because I have such a lot of associations with kind of loss of home in my life in a bunch of ways, and I feel like I've been trying to find home ever since. But if I were to think of a spot, the first thing that comes to mind is my tent. And just like having hiked somewhere over a long period of time, and like my body is tired, and I've just like eaten whatever food was on my back, and I've just like laid down in my tent. That feels like home to me. It connects me to the younger me when I was a little kid, and sort of struggling and really dealing with confidence issues and body issues and all these things. And I would climb these mountains, and I would like hate it going up, but then I would feel so proud of myself when I would get there. And like, there's something about being in a tent that I just feel like, hello, Peter, there you are.
Peter, that hits me on so many levels, and I'm glad that you have a tent. I'm glad that you have that space. And again, knowing parts of your story that you shared with me, I just, that tent one day I am very confident is going to be on a plot of land where all of a sudden all of this makes sense. And I'm so happy for you that you have that something where you can go to emotionally, and I also have all of the confidence in the world that that tent one day will be on a front yard somewhere or in a backyard.
Thanks. Well, I kind of have it here, but then I get all this fear about losing it and all that kind of stuff. So it's so complicated the way that we sabotage ourselves. But
it is
for another episode.
For another episode. And let me tell you, Freud would have a field day. Freud would have a field day interpreting both of our emotional homes. But that is a whole other episode we can explore.
Yeah. Beautiful. All right, Robyne. Well, a real pleasure to connect with you in your little cozy nook. And I can't wait for people to hear what you're going to be recording there, because I already know that it's going to change lives, and it's going to matter, and it's going to be meaningful for people. So I can't wait.
Well, thank you, my friend. And thanks for listening, everyone. And we look forward to having you join us next time.